You ever have one of those days where you wake up tired, not physically, but something deeper? You slept, you rested, you didn't even do that much yesterday, and still, you feel like your brain is already done before the day even starts. So you tell yourself, all right, I just need discipline today. But then, you open your phone for a second, just 1 second, and suddenly, 40 minutes are gone. You didn't even enjoy it. You didn't even want to be there. Now you feel worse. Because now it's not just exhaustion. Now it's guilt. And that voice shows up again. Why am I like this? Why can't I just focus? Why am I so lazy? But what if you're asking the wrong question? What if the problem isn't that you're lazy? What if you're mentally exhausted in a way you don't even realize? There's a specific type of tired that sleep doesn't fix. It's not about your body. It's about your attention, your decisions, your emotional energy. And the scary part is, most people don't even know this kind of exhaustion exists. They just think, I need to try harder. So they push themselves more. They force discipline. They blame themselves. And slowly, they start hating the person they're becoming. Because from the outside, it looks like laziness. You delay things. You avoid things. You scroll instead of working. But from the inside, it feels completely different. It feels like your brain is constantly overloaded. Like there's too much open in your head. Too many tabs. Too many unfinished thoughts. Too many expectations. And no matter how hard you try, you can't fully focus on anything. Not because you don't care, but because your system is already maxed out. And this is where it gets dangerous, because the world you live in doesn't understand this. It doesn't see exhaustion. It only sees output. If you're not producing, you're lazy. If you're not improving, you're wasting time. If you're not moving fast, you're falling behind. So you start believing it too. You start thinking, maybe I really am the problem, but you're not. And once you understand what's actually happening inside your brain, everything starts to make sense. Let's start with something simple. You think you're resting, but you're not. Scrolling, watching short videos, jumping between apps. This doesn't give your brain rest. It gives it constant stimulation. Your brain was never designed to process this much information this fast for this long. Every swipe, every notification, every new piece of content forces your brain to reset its focus again and again and again. And here's the problem. Every time your attention shifts, your brain pays a cost. It's small, almost invisible, but it adds up. By the end of the day, you're not physically tired, your attention depleted. And this changes everything. Because now, when you sit down to do something important, you don't have the energy left to focus deeply. Not because you're lazy, but because your brain has already spent its capacity on things that didn't matter. Think about it like this. Imagine you wake up every morning with a limited amount of mental energy. Let's say 100 units. Now, watch what happens. Checking your phone first thing leads to -10. Scrolling without thinking leads to -15. Switching between apps, -10. Random thoughts plus comparison, -10. Notifications interrupting you, -15. And suddenly, before you even start your actual work, you're already at 40 or less. And deep work? That requires at least 60 to 70. So what do? You avoid it, not consciously, but your brain knows, I don't have enough energy for this. So it pushes you toward easier things, faster things, dopamine-heavy things. And then you look at yourself from the outside and say, I have no discipline. But discipline isn't the issue. Energy is. Here's the part nobody tells you. Your brain is not trying to sabotage you. It's trying to protect you. When your mental energy drops, your brain shifts into survival mode. It looks for low effort, quick reward, minimal thinking, because that's what keeps you going with the least cost. So no, you're not broken, you're adapting. But adapting to what? That's the real question. Because this level of constant stimulation, this never-ending input, this wasn't always normal. There's a reason your brain feels like this. And it's not random. It's structural. You think you're tired because of what you do, but most of your exhaustion comes from what you're surrounded by. Look at your day for a second. From the moment you wake up, your brain is under attack, not physically, but mentally. Notifications, messages, news, videos, opinions, expectations, even silence doesn't feel like silence anymore because your mind is still processing everything it absorbed. And here's the part most people don't see. Your environment is not neutral. It's designed. Every app you use, every platform you open, every feed you scroll through is competing for one thing: your attention. Because attention is no longer just focus, it's currency. The longer you stay, the more you click, the more you engage, the more valuable you become. So these systems are built to do one thing: keep you mentally occupied, not satisfied, not fulfilled, just occupied. And the way they do it is incredibly subtle. They don't overwhelm you all at once. That would be obvious. Instead, they drain you slowly. A little distraction here, a little dopamine there, a little comparison, a little anxiety. Nothing extreme, but constant. And your brain never fully gets a break. Even when you're lying in bed, doing nothing, your mind is still active, still processing, still replaying, still reacting. So you wake up tired, not because you didn't rest, but because your brain never actually stopped working. This is what mental exhaustion really is. Not overworking your body, but overloading your mind. And when this becomes your normal state, everything starts to feel harder. Simple tasks feel heavy. Decisions feel exhausting. Focus feels impossible. Not because they are difficult, but because you're already depleted. Now, here's where it gets even deeper. Because this doesn't just affect your energy, it affects how you see yourself. When you can't focus, when you delay things, when you avoid effort, you don't think, my environment is draining me. You think, I'm the problem. And that belief is where real damage begins. Because once you label yourself as lazy, everything you do starts confirming it. You hesitate. See? Lazy. You scroll. Of course lazy. You feel tired. I'm just weak. And slowly, this becomes your identity. Not something you're experiencing, but something you are. And once that happens, you stop trying to understand the cause. You just try to fight yourself. More discipline, more pressure, more self-criticism. But fighting yourself while you're already exhausted only makes it worse. So you end up in a loop. Exhausted to can't focus, to feel guilty, to push harder, to burn out more. And you think, this is just who I am. But it's not. It's your environment. And once you see that clearly, something shifts. Because now, instead of blaming yourself, you start asking a different question. What is this system doing to me? You've probably heard this your whole life. If you just had more discipline, your life would change. Wake up earlier, work harder, stay consistent, push through. Sounds logical, right? But here's the problem. This advice assumes one thing, that your system is functioning normally, but it's not. Telling an exhausted brain to be more disciplined is like telling someone who's drowning to swim faster. It doesn't solve the problem. It ignores it. Because discipline is not your starting point, it's your output. And output depends on something deeper, your mental capacity. When your brain is overloaded, when your attention is fragmented, when your energy is drained, discipline doesn't activate. It collapses. That's why some days you feel focused, sharp, unstoppable. And other days, even the simplest task feels impossible. It's not your character changing, it's your capacity. But instead of understanding this, you were taught to do something else. Force consistency. So what do? You ignore your mental state and try to act disciplined anyway. You push through exhaustion. You override your brain. You fight your own signals. And for a short time, it works. You get things done. You feel productive. You think, this is it. But then you crash hard. Because forced discipline is not sustainable. It burns energy you don't have. And the more you repeat this cycle, the worse it gets. At some point, even starting becomes difficult. Not because you don't want to, but because your brain remembers, last time we did this, it hurt. So it resists. And you interpret that resistance as, I'm lazy again. But it's not laziness, it's protection. Your brain is trying to avoid burnout. And here's the truth most people never hear. Discipline without energy is self-destruction, because you're building a system based on force, not sustainability. And force always breaks. So the real question is not, how do I become more disciplined? The real question is, why do I have so little energy to begin with? Because once you fix that, discipline stops being a struggle. It becomes natural. There's a moment you probably know too well. You sit down to do something important. You're ready. You even feel motivated for a second. And then, almost automatically, your hand reaches for your phone. You don't think about it. You don't decide. It just happens. And the strange part is, you already know this is a bad idea. You know it will waste your time. You know it will make you feel worse. You know you'll regret it. And still, you do it. So what is this? Lack of discipline? Weak mindset? No. This is dopamine. But not in the way people usually explain it. Dopamine is not just about pleasure, it's about anticipation. It's the feeling of something interesting might happen. And your brain is addicted to that feeling. Every scroll, every refresh, every new video is a possibility. Maybe this one will be exciting. Maybe this one will surprise me. Maybe this one will give me something new. And your brain keeps chasing that maybe. Now compare that to real work. There's no instant reward, no surprise, no quick hit, just effort, time, uncertainty. So your brain makes a calculation. Why invest energy here when I can get a faster reward over there? And it chooses the easier option, not because you're weak, but because your brain is optimized for efficiency. And here's where it becomes dangerous. The more you choose fast dopamine, the harder it becomes to choose slow reward, because your baseline changes. Normal things start feeling boring. Deep work feels heavy. Focus feels uncomfortable, not because something is wrong with you, but because your brain has been trained to expect constant stimulation. And now, anything less feels like a loss. This is why you can watch videos for hours, but struggle to focus for 20 minutes. It's not about effort. It's about what your brain has adapted to. And the worst part is, this creates a trap. You feel exhausted, so you seek easy dopamine, which drains you more, so you feel even more exhausted. And the cycle continues. And again, from the outside, this looks like laziness. But from the inside, it's a loop you didn't even consciously create. So no, you're not choosing distraction. You've been conditioned to need it. And until you understand that, you'll keep fighting symptoms instead of fixing the cause. There's something happening in your life that you probably never notice, but it's draining you every single day. Decisions. Not the big ones, not life-changing choices, the small ones, constant, endless, invisible. What to wear, what to eat, what to check, what to reply, what to watch, what to do next. It doesn't feel heavy, but your brain is processing hundreds of these every day, and each one costs energy. This is called decision fatigue, and it's one of the biggest reasons you feel exhausted, even when you haven't done anything hard. Because your brain doesn't separate important and unimportant decisions. Every choice requires attention, evaluation, energy, and over time, this builds pressure. By the middle of your day, your brain starts looking for shortcuts, not because you're lazy, but because it's tired of deciding. So what happens? You start avoiding decisions, you delay things, you postpone tasks, you say, "I'll do it later." Not because you don't care, but because choosing feels heavy. And this is where things get interesting. Because when your brain is overloaded, it doesn't just get tired, it changes how it behaves. It starts choosing easier options, familiar patterns, immediate rewards. Which means, even if you planned your day perfectly, your brain will drift toward the simplest path, not the best one, the easiest one. And again, you look at this from the outside and think, I lack discipline. But what's really happening is, you've run out of decision energy. And here's the deeper layer. Your environment makes this worse. Too many options, too many choices, too many possibilities. Open your phone, and you're instantly faced with what to watch, what to click, what to read, what to respond to. Your brain is constantly filtering, constantly selecting, constantly deciding, and this creates noise, mental clutter. So when it's finally time to do something important, your brain says, no more, not out of laziness, out of exhaustion. And then you escape into scrolling, into distraction, into anything that doesn't require a decision. Because in those moments, your brain isn't looking for pleasure. It's looking for relief. Relief from thinking, relief from choosing, relief from pressure. And that's why doing nothing sometimes feels better than doing something meaningful, even if you know it's wrong. Because your brain isn't optimizing for success, it's optimizing for survival. Now think about this. If your entire day is draining your mental energy before you even start your real work, then what chance does discipline actually have? This is why your struggle feels constant, not occasional, because the drain is constant. At this point, you might be starting to see a pattern. You're tired, not because you're doing too much, but because your mind is constantly being used. Your attention is fragmented. Your energy is drained. Your decisions are overloaded. Your dopamine is hijacked. And all of this leads to one thing. You can't focus. And when you can't focus, you can't build. You can't think deeply. You can't create consistently. You can't move forward with clarity. And that raises a question most people never ask. What if this isn't random? What if this state is not just happening to you, but is actually being reinforced? Because think about it. A focused person is dangerous. Someone who can sit for hours, think clearly, ignore distractions, and work toward long-term goals is very hard to control. They don't react easily. They don't chase quick rewards. They don't follow noise. They build their own direction. Now compare that to someone who is mentally exhausted, constantly distracted, always switching focus, easily influenced, always seeking quick relief. That person is predictable, and predictable people are easy to guide, not by force, but by design. Because when your brain is tired, you don't question things deeply. You accept what's in front of you. You consume, you react, you follow, not consciously, automatically. And the systems around you are built exactly for that, to keep you engaged, not aware, to keep you stimulated, not focused, to keep you busy, not progressing. Because attention is the most valuable resource today, and the longer they keep it, the more they gain. So everything is optimized for one thing: keeping your mind occupied. Not because someone is targeting you personally, but because this model works, and it scales. Millions of people feeling the same exhaustion, thinking the same thought, "I'm the problem," when in reality, they're just inside the same system. And this is the shift that changes everything. Because once you see this clearly, you stop attacking yourself. You stop saying, "I need to fix myself," and you start asking, "What do I need to remove?" Because the goal is not to become stronger, it's to become less drained. And that's a completely different approach. At this point, you don't need more motivation. You don't need another productivity trick. What you need is space. Because everything we talked about, attention overload, dopamine loops, decision fatigue, constant stimulation, they all lead to one thing. Your brain has no room left, and without space, clarity is impossible. So instead of asking, "How do I do more?" start asking, "What can I remove?" Because this is where real change begins, not by adding effort, but by reducing noise. And here's something most people underestimate: even small reductions create massive impact. You don't need to fix your entire life. You just need to stop constantly draining yourself. Let's make this real. Imagine you wake up, and instead of reaching for your phone, you sit in silence for just 10 minutes. No input, no scrolling, no stimulation. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Your brain wants something, anything, because it's used to constant input. But if you stay there, something interesting happens. Your mind starts to settle. The noise slows down. Thoughts become clearer, not because you trained harder, but because you stopped overwhelming yourself. This is what most people never experience: a brain that is not constantly reacting. Now take this further. You reduce notifications, you limit random scrolling, you stop jumping between tasks, not perfectly, just slightly. And suddenly, you notice something. You can focus again, not for hours, not instantly, but more than before. And that's the key. Because clarity doesn't come from intensity, it comes from consistency in reducing noise. Now, here's the important part. This is not about becoming extreme, not about deleting everything, not about isolating yourself. That's not sustainable. This is about awareness, seeing what drains you, and slowly creating boundaries. Because every boundary you create protects your energy, and protected energy turns into focus, and focus turns into action, without force, without constant struggle, without needing to fight yourself. And this is where things start to shift. Because for the first time, you're not trying to fix your behavior. You're changing the conditions that create it. At some point, you stopped seeing this as a phase. It became a label. I'm lazy, not I feel tired, not I'm overwhelmed. I'm just that kind of person. And once that idea settles in, everything changes. Because now, you're not dealing with a problem. You're defining your identity. And identity is powerful. Because you don't fight your identity, you act according to it. So if you believe you're lazy, every action starts aligning with that belief. But maybe you were never lazy to begin with. Maybe you were just overloaded, not broken, not weak, just drained. And once you see that clearly, something shifts. Because now, instead of fighting yourself, you start protecting your energy. And when your energy changes, everything else follows.